as U.S. President Donald Trump recognizes Jerusalem as the capital of Israel.
Palestinians react with anger and, from much of the world, condemnation.
Plus, California burning wildfires are raging in several parts of the state, including Los Angeles. Thanks for joining us. I'm Amra Walker.
And I'm Michael Holmes. Welcome, everyone, to CNN Today. With two major stories for you. First, the explosive wildfires in California that are picking up speed and threatening the Los Angeles area.
Yeah, the winds are expected to get worse in the next 24 hours, reaching near hurricane force levels. Not good news at all. Also, an historic and controversial decision by the U.S. president that upends 7 decades of American foreign policy and threatens to end the Israeli-Palestinian peace process and further inflame tensions in the Middle East.
I have determined that it is time to officially recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel.
The president also announced his decision to move the U.S. Embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem.
We have reporters throughout the region covering all the angles. Nick Robertson in Jerusalem. We begin, though, with Sarah Murray, who joins us from the White House. Not entirely unexpected, but pretty much outside of Israel. The U.S. standing alone on this one.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And we've obviously heard concern about unrest in the Middle East. But look, the president made it very clear when he made this decision, when he made this announcement today, that he felt like he was fulfilling a key campaign promise, one that prior U.S. presidents have made along the way but haven't fulfilled. Here's what President Trump had to say today.
It is time to officially recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. While previous presidents have made this a major campaign promise, they failed to deliver. Today, I am delivering. I've judged this course of action to be in the best interests of the United States of America and the pursuit of peace between Israel and the Palestinians. This is nothing more or less than a recognition of reality. It is also the right thing to do. We want an agreement that is a great deal for the Israelis and a great deal for the Palestinians. We are not taking a position of any final status issues, including the specific boundaries of the Israeli sovereignty in Jerusalem or the resolution of contested borders. Those questions are up to the parties involved.
Now, one of the other things the president said when he was making this announcement is essentially there has been no progress on reaching an Israeli-Palestinian peace agreement. The White House has insisted that they don't believe that this will undermine those efforts, although they have been unable to explain why they think such a move would potentially be helpful. And remember, this is particularly challenging because the president's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, one of the senior advisors here at the White House, has made Mideast peace one of his key portfolio issues.
And Sarah, I just want to ask you, how does the president benefit from this move politically at home, especially when you look at polls that show the majority of Americans do not support America recognizing Jerusalem as the capital of Israel?
Well, look, it's a great question. I mean, sources say that this is partly the president trying to do different things to shore up his base right now. He is worried about the people who elected him, who put him in the White House, and he wants to do things to try to fulfill those campaign promises. But it does make you wonder, in the broader context of whether this is a good policy decision, whether this will move the president forward on his other policy aims, like trying to reach a Mideast peace agreement, or whether this might be a move that maybe plays with a small segment of his base, but could potentially be harmful to some of the broader things he wants to do in this White House.
All right, Sarah Murray, thank you so much. Live for us there at the White House.
Thanks, Sarah, for that. Let's turn now to Nick Robertson, who is in Jerusalem right now. And as we were saying, a condemnation from around the world, but not where you are.
No, warmly received by most Israelis. On the wall behind me, the wall of the old city, you can see the Jaffa Gate there, just out of sight. A huge projection of the Israeli and US flags flying side by side has been projected onto the wall of the old city here, and that does seem to really underscore the general sentiment. An historic day is how the Transport Minister Israel Katz described it earlier on. Nir Barakat, the mayor of Jerusalem, stood exactly where I'm standing a few hours ago and said that he welcomed this. And this is what we heard from the Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu. He waited to make his announcement until after President Trump had spoken. But this was a very warm thanks for the US president. He said it was a courageous decision.
We're profoundly grateful for the president for his courageous and just decision to recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel and to prepare for the opening of the U.S. Embassy here. This decision reflects the president's commitment to an ancient but enduring truth, to fulfilling his promises and to advancing peace.
So what we heard from the Israeli Prime Minister there was, a clear support and clearly happy with what President Trump has done. He also echoed one of the things that President Trump has said in his announcement about the access to the different important religious sites for Muslims, for Jews, for Christians here. The Israeli Prime Minister saying that nothing would change on the ground, that Israelis would guarantee the access to those key sites, because that has been an important concern about the detail of what President Trump would say and how that would reflect on the ground here, and would it change anything. So in that context, the Israeli Prime Minister is saying that it doesn't change anything physically on the ground at the moment for anyone who wants to visit the religiously important historic sites here.
And what about the reaction from the Palestinians? What are we seeing? What do we expect to see? And also from a strategic and political standpoint, what will the Palestinians do from here?
Sure. Well, Saeb Erekat, one of the key negotiators in the Palestinian-Israeli peace for decades now, described this as the worst decision ever by President Trump. What we're hearing from other Palestinian leaders is that this is a view that's reflected by other international leaders, particularly in this region as well, that it calls into question the United States' ability to be a moderator, to be a mediator in negotiations between Israelis and Palestinians. It seems that, where the Palestinians have an opportunity to go with this would be if they continue with this line, if the leadership decides to follow this particular line that they're following now, a way to sort of try to internationalize, as they have been in previous years, trying to bring about a peace deal that they feel favors them and doesn't disadvantage them. So in essence, what you have here, if you have regional leaders here and around the world saying that this does call into question the United States' ability to be a fair and unbiased mediator in all of this, and the Palestinian leadership is saying that this is something that they could push for. However, this is a step that we've seen Palestinians try to do before. But at the moment, when you look at today's development from President Trump, this is certainly something that at the moment Israelis really feel favors them, strengthens their position.
And as you were talking about the reaction from around the world, including from Arab leaders, we're also hearing from the Palestinian leader Mahmoud Abbas. Here's what he had to say.
Salutation to our brave captives and to our injured people who have sacrificed themselves for the sake of Palestine and Jerusalem. Long live Palestine, long live Jerusalem, the free, eternal and Arabic capital of the state of Palestine.
Oh, Nick, we're going to follow up with you on that. And when it comes to the peace process and the president saying that he can move this forward, how? In many ways, Jerusalem was a point of leverage. It was a prize, if you like, for the negotiations. Has that prize been given away with nothing in return?
Well, what President Trump didn't do, although he said, we're not going to prescribe what the boundaries of the capitals, may be in boundaries of land agreements in the future may be. We're not prescribing that. We're not laying that down. What he didn't lay down, he said he didn't rule out a two-state solution either, but what he didn't lay down is the step-by-step or even a rough roadmap of how you would get to whatever negotiated deal that the United States supports, how the United States, Jared Kushner, is going to push forward on that track. We didn't get a sense of that. So, I think from when President Trump doesn't articulate that, and this is what other world leaders have said that they wanted to hear, that it has been, Jerusalem being the capital of Israel and Palestinians wanting it as their capital too. This has been widely viewed by the international community as a key important negotiating strategy. We have had some former US mediators in Palestinian-Israeli peace saying that, well, perhaps what President Trump is doing here, perhaps, and it's not clear that he has, but perhaps what he has done is given the Israelis something that they want, and that President Trump may go and collect a concession from them in the future. But if that is the case, and this was only, people have been close to this, US officials have been close to this process in the past, this was only their analysis of what it could be. There was no indication from President Trump that this was part of a bigger strategy, because he didn't lay out the details of what that strategy might be.
Yeah, very good point. We're going to leave it there. Nick Robertson, thank you so much. Live for us there in Jerusalem. And as Nick has been indicating, international reaction has been pouring in after Mr. Trump's announcement, with a number of nations around the world now expressing concern with the U.S. decision.
And what you're looking at there is just some of the reaction. Let's start with a long-time U.S. ally, the UK. There, the British Prime Minister Theresa May said, quote, "We believe it is unhelpful in terms of prospects for peace in the region."
A spokesman for the Chinese Foreign Ministry said his country is concerned about the possible escalation of conflicts in the region. And Turkey has called the U.S. move a big mistake, with the president saying that any such move would only embolden terrorist organizations.
A similar sentiment from Jordan, where, of course, there is a large Palestinian population. King Abdullah said that ignoring Palestinian, Muslim and Christian rights in Jerusalem could fuel terrorism. And in Russia, a Kremlin spokesman said there was, quote, serious concern for possible deterioration of the situation in Jerusalem.
Our next guest calls Mr. Trump's decision on Jerusalem, quote, deeply unwise, and fears it will weaken U.S. credibility. Nicholas Burns joining us now to share more of his perspective. He was the former U.S. ambassador to NATO and Greece and former U.S. Undersecretary for Political Affairs. Ambassador, thank you for joining us. So again, we understand you obviously oppose Mr. Trump's recognition of Jerusalem as Israel's capital, but President Trump said that this is in the best interest of the United States. Is there any way you can see how this might be in the best interest of the United States? What does the U.S. gain from this?
This is going to harm the United States, Amra. Every one of our presidents, going back to Harry Truman, has had to make this same decision. All of them made the decision that we should not prejudge the negotiations between the Israelis and Palestinians. We're a potential mediator. They have to make these big decisions, and the United States should not pick sides and favor one side versus the other on this critical issue of whether or not Jerusalem's the Israeli capital or whether it's the Israeli and Palestinian capital in a two-state solution. So the president has made a decision which is going to hurt the United States, hurt our credibility, and the irony here is he didn't have to make it. There are no negotiations to speak of underway. And usually in a negotiation, if Jerusalem is going to be one of the 2 or 3 most important issues, you want to make these compromises about what the U.S. will do very late in the game. And as your previous conversation with Nick Robertson indicated, President Trump made this major concession to the Israeli government and received nothing in return for it.
You tweeted today that it was, in fact, a diplomatic malpractice to do this. It was interesting, the president still said the U.S. supports 2 states if the 2 sides disagree. Is there something in that if? Because it used to be that was the U.S. position, that there had to be a 2-state solution. Is the president backing off a little bit, or are we reading too much into that? If he says, if the 2 sides agree, then we support a 2-state solution.
Michael, I had the same reaction as you. This is a weakening of the American position. Both President George W. Bush and President Barack Obama were resolutely and unambiguously clear. The United States supports two states, not if the parties want it. This is the solution that we think is the only way to achieve peace between the Israelis and Palestinians, that both of them deserve a state, both of them deserve a capital in Jerusalem. And so President Trump has significantly weakened the U.S. position. I think he's thrown into doubt now exactly what he's trying to achieve. And as Nick Robertson said in this very good interview you did with him, there was no strategy today. And I think the president has probably done this for domestic political reasons here in the United States to shore up his base. So he's in effect putting his personal political interests above what is the national interest, but also the international interest, to see if we can get an agreement at some point in the future after 69 years of division between the Israelis and Palestinians.
Sure, but the fact that President Trump made a distinction that his declaration doesn't determine the final status of Jerusalem. He also signed that waiver delaying the embassy move to Jerusalem. Does that soften the blow, the impact in any way?
It really doesn't. What the United States did today under President Trump's leadership is to side resolutely with one of the two parties to this conflict. Now, obviously, we have a very close relationship with Israel, and we should, and we support the state of Israel. But in this negotiation, it's clear that the United States is the principal mediator still after decades between the two. Mediators have to be neutral and fair. And you can't put one party into a position of tremendous advantage over the other. And that's what the president did today. It was very unwise. And he prizes himself as this great negotiator. But frankly, this is a shambles. And I think it's going to take a long while for the United States, our credibility, to recover from this mistake.
Yeah, and Israel's always said that Jerusalem would be its eternal and undivided capital, so perhaps this gives them a little bit of ammunition on that line too when it comes to East Jerusalem and a potential capital for any Palestinian state. Nick, we've got to leave it there. Nicholas Burns, thank you so much. I really appreciate it, Ambassador.
Thank you. Time to take a short break. When we come back, American evangelicals are cheering Mr. Trump's announcement on Jerusalem. A closer look at why in an interview. That's live straight ahead.
Yeah, this city is definitely on fire.
And putting out the fire, proving to be a difficult challenge with the wind whipping up the flames. Stay with us. Complete coverage of the Southern California wildfires when we come back.